And Carrie, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I don't know if you want to add some context because I've heard that this bottle is fantastic.
It is, but can we do this? And if you guys have a different opinion, I'd like to talk about the white first, but I promise you all, once we get into the red and a little bit deeper into the story of BV, which will be quick, even though it started in 1900, so it'll be abbreviated. I would love to talk about that after, but I promise you, very, very rarely do you get 100-point wine and named #1 wine of the year, and that is in the world.
Wow.
So I strongly encourage you to ask questions. And do questions count for me, Casey, or just for you
They
guys?
do. Yep.
All right.
All evening.
Perfect. So I can make mine. I have 10 minutes per wine. And I don't know how flexible you guys are, but you guys jump in, ask me questions. I will answer them and I will flex and roll as it goes. All right. This is wine. This is fun. So the first wine most of you have, and I understand that due to shipping constraints, some of you do not all have the same wine. If there are any questions specifically about the wine you have, please put them in the chat so that it counts as one of your questions for the raffle. But then we'll get, myself and Mimi will take care of those for you as well after, if you guys don't mind sending those over to us. But really the first wine that you have is in front of me now is the Beaulieu, and it's Beaulieu Vineyard, or you can just say BV, whichever way you want. This is our 2021 Sauvignon Blanc. A lot of people in Napa Valley make Sauvignon Blanc. Not many people make it like this. And this is the style I like. Not to say the other style isn't good. This is grown in Rutherford. So for those of you who are drinking it, when you smell, you can smell fruit and flower, right? And Sam, is that what you're having? Because I can see your face.
Yes, I know. It seems like I'll be
Okay.
your second today, so I'll
There
be
you
your
go.
backup.
So one of the things is this does not have, oh yeah, the salami, by the way, Rick, good call. But this is literally grown in Rutherford. As you're moving north in our valley, you get hotter and drier. It's only 30 miles long. It's not huge, but there are microclimates that at certain points in the year are 50 degrees in those 30 miles. On average, we say a degree a mile, be it up or down. So when you are smelling this, that's my happy place. And by the way, for those of you, we may have some wine connoisseurs and some new people. There are some important things about wine, and the 3 most important words you need: yummy, yucky, and meh. And that's it, because it's all about what you like and what you can have a phenomenal wine, and it's not your bailiwick. And that's it. It is very nice. So go ahead and take a sip. See, that's my happy face. So this one in particular, rather than a very grassy, citrusy New Zealand style, you're going to get a lot more of that tropical fruit without residual sugar. It doesn't mean it's a sweet wine. It is not a sweet wine. There is not residual sugar in there. And I do encourage you all, because everyone's palate is different, try it with the different cheeses. I personally do as well, Rick. New Zealand style is a little too grassy for me, but they're still beautiful. But again, that's just what everyone likes. But try it with the different cheeses, Because I can tell you which cheese I think would go best with this. But you may completely disagree, so I don't want to put something in your head. But I will give you a suggestion on two things that go phenomenal with this, especially with Sunday around the corner. Many people may or may not be having brunch. Ceviche. Does anyone do ceviche?
Ooh.
Okay.
Mm.
So Ty, when you're done, when you're done cooking, if you will, or buying, whichever, get a little fresh mango and cut it up in there. It literally, it opens this wine. It's amazing because you do get that essence of mango in there, that tropical fruit. That is wonderful. For those of you who are not really willing to cook fish in acid, we'll go with that. Deviled eggs, super easy to make, right? Go to a good fishmonger. Get some sushi grade ahi tuna, little bit on top of a deviled egg, tiny sprinkle of pink Himalayan sea salt. With this wine, and brunch is served.
I think I'm taking notes right now, unless anyone else is too.
And there is, now here is the other thing I want to point out about Sauvignon Blanc. The thing, well, let me grab the bottle, which you're not going to be able to see with my background, but I'll put it right in front of my face. The wonderful thing about the, and yes, this was in the fridge, so it's sweating a little, I'm sorry. It does have the Stelvin enclosure or screw top. We have to make words fancy because you can't say screw top. Not meant to age, right? So it doesn't need a cork. It's not meant to age. It is meant to be consumed. And the other thing is, in the United States, I know we have a lot of participants from Canada. I'm not sure about Canada. I'm pretty sure it's the same. Most people drink their white wines too warm, and I'm sorry, too cold, and their red wines too warm. So, but here's the thing with Sauvignon Blanc. It's what you like. So when it's 115 degrees in St. Helena, I put it in the fridge. I pour a small pour. I put it back in the fridge because it's warming up right away. And with red wines, they're always in a wine fridge, but if it's out too long, I'll always pop it back in. I'm sorry, I just saw Peter's. Yeah, we call that mulled wine, Peter, by the way, and we put some spices in it. But no, it's all about how you like it. And that is the thing that I think makes wine unapproachable to people. They think there's a right and a wrong, and there is. If you're doing it the way you don't enjoy it, you're doing it wrong. If you're doing it the way you enjoy it, you're doing it correctly. So.
That's a message I can get behind.
There you go. You'll even let your wife hear that one, Ty, right?
That's right.
All right, any questions before we jump in to the next part of the presentation? I have only seen little bits of the chat pop up. I'm sorry, I don't know if there's a question in there.
I think right now it sums up that everyone's just really excited to be having this glass of wine.
Wonderful.
And also, I think I've seen a lot of people enjoying the recommendations of pairings, which I can also agree with.
Yeah, good. My favorite cheese with the Sauvignon Blanc. Again, I want you to try all of them. There's not exactly one on the list that is my favorite. Sauvignon Blanc being light and crisp isn't as much of a cheese kind of wine. It needs to be a much lighter cheese. But the one thing I would say, which it could be hit or miss, and I'm sorry, the Gorgonzola that they had sent, I love their suggestion of a tiny drizzle of honey on it. That would probably be my favorite, but since I'm not tasting the cheese, I don't want to speak to that. But otherwise, I would probably actually go with the Gouda. Anything else?
We do have a question on a good alternative for a cork opener.
A good alternative for what is the question for a cork opener? I'm sorry, I don't see that.
An alternative for opening up a bottle of wine without one.
Oh, yeah, you know what? There are several. It depends on what you plan on doing with it. First of all, with this one, you're probably going to drink it within a few days, right? So the screw top is great. Just put the cap right back on. And let's say, two secrets, first of all, let's say you forget for a few days and half the bottle's gone and you still want to do it. No, this is being recorded. I will deny, even though it's on record. You take the bottle and you shake it. Literally that vigorously. It will bring it back to life for another glass. It's not going to bring it back to life for a week. But really for opening a bottle of wine, you want a Coravin. And again, it depends. If you're looking at going into your cellar and just getting a tiny pour of a wine to test something out, you want a true Coravin with the needle. Coravin now has a pivot, which is only $99, I think. Granted, you still have to buy the argon gas, which is expensive. The shoe wall combo. Yeah, that does not work. But with the pivot, you take the cork out, you immediately put a new stopper in that is very, very specific. It has a bladder in it. Then you put the Coravin in when you want to pour a glass. And the nice thing about the pivots is it is push to pour. So rather than the old ones that put in X amount of argon gas, no matter how much wine you want out, you know. Does that answer that one?
I think that's more than perfect. Yeah.
Okay. I really want to see what happened with the ski cap.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I also got distracted by that.
Yeah, I know.
The song
This
was
is
having a
quite like,
great
you
week.
guys are so fun. This is like squirrel. What?
And I have my eyes darting back and forth.
All right, are we ready to hop into the first piece of content with Hudu?
I'm all set over here. It
You're all
sounds
set?
like we got a pretty solid yes as well in the chat. So I appreciate that.
Perfect. I will put you guys on mute, turn my camera off for a second. And I forgot to let my German Shepherd out, who is going to bark any second when someone walks by. I'm going to go do that, but I'll be right back.
We'll stall for you, I promise.
No, you don't need to stall. I'll be right back.
So yeah, getting into the actual content part now, let's talk about some documentation. Now, I'm going to be talking about some things and best practices in general. This is not specific to Hudu. This is really something that we just want to be universally applicable. And so part of that is just building that foundation, starting off with removing the decision-making, making it easy to document, treating documentation as a living, breathing organism, and creating a documentation structure. So if we can go on to the next one real quick, we're going to be talking about additional other items and break it down further. So when it's talking about how to make it easy, how to document, what to document, and where to document are incredibly important. And as we bring more clarity to those items, we can make it a whole lot easier. So now let's break down the how to document part. So when it comes to the how to document, we're going to be talking about the important and critical details. It's okay to iterate, build on, but get those necessary details early and as soon as possible. There is such a thing as too much documentation, but we want to try to identify the difference between too little and too much. So find those critical details, make sure that they're easy to point out, and make sure that you're highlighting those well. And then we get to the next part of revisit and keep improving. Just because you write it down once does not mean that it's finished and done with. We do have to come back to this information, make sure that it's updated, that we're coming back, adding those additional details. Don't store everything in your head. It's beneficial for everyone to make sure that when a new detail comes up or new context, record it. And the next is colors, formatting, and clear language. We shouldn't have to decrypt any documentation. Write it for the person who's reading it, not be writing it for how you think it sounds in your head. We want to make sure that when they see information, it's identifiable, it's clear, and it's legible and easy to quickly digest. And the next part, and this is a really, really important one, and that's spend the time finding your structure. As you're going to be building in documentation structures, it is something that is going to take time initially to set up, but it's incredibly important to do it at the beginning. Understand your full scope, making sure that you have it down first. If you record it and then go to fix it later, you might find that that revision process is a lot longer as you do identify those efficiencies and items. So spend the time now and make sure that you are investing that initial time. It will pay off rather than having to course correct down the road. And then finally, a document on how to document. Something that does seem really simple, but it is incredibly important. What is the standard of how it should look like? What are the key items that you're looking for? Gold examples are a great identifier of what looks great, but take the time to document what the expectations are, what you're expecting from these items. Whether it's a KB article or an example, making sure that you are explicit on the expectations can make your documentation a ton better when they have a set of rules that are solid to go back to. Now, moving on to the next part, we're going to talk about that next section, which is going to be the, I believe it is the where to document. Oh, just kidding. We're going to talk about naming standards. So naming standards in this case are just standardizing it across the board. Make sure you keep it short and sweet and make sure that it's searchable. When you're looking for information, make sure that you can actually identify what you're looking for. If you don't know the full thing, if you aren't able to quickly identify the full word for it, or you're trying to identify and call back, the naming convention is incredibly important. Having guidelines that you share with the team, and you will also have different naming conventions for different documentation. And so taking a look at that next slide, we can talk about that next section, which is the type of categories, the use cases for them. When we talk about applications, we want to be direct. What exactly is it? The subject should be straight to the point. And then when you're actually using this wording, how to audit setup. When you're clicking onto an article, if it's just Windows 11, that's not really going to help a whole lot of people. And now it does seem something that's very simple, but this is extremely pivotal, and make sure that you're standardizing this naming convention. And then on to the next one, please. So now we're going to talk about the what to document. So there are different forms of documentation, and identifying them a little bit is really important. Now, this is based off of the diataxis structure, but we're going to break it out into the 3 important items that we think is really important. The process documentation. These are the tasks, the how-to. This is going to be a checklist, a direct setup, and a walkthrough versus the tutorial. The tutorial should be a learning aspect, and you should come out understanding what's going on. This is concrete, direct information, not necessarily abstract comments. And then finally, this is your reference documentation. This is going to be the information that's direct to the point that you want to make sure you understand immediately upon looking at. And this is another point where Liongard does come in really in handy. That automatic documentation, having that within Hudu, when you're not having to manually record all of your IP addresses, your computer information like that, this reference documentation is meant to be quick, easy, and accessible. And then on to the next slide, please. Now, the next is where to document. We can have the right structure, we can have the right naming conventions, but is it easy to access? Are you jumping between multiple programs? Are you able to store that in one area? We want something fast, something that works around your structure. This shouldn't be something that you have to fit into a box. You're trying to work around their constraints. Make sure that it's malleable and that it works for your processes and for your workflow. And another thing is a single source of truth, that single program. That way you're not jumping between multiple windows constantly trying to find that one item that could be stored in multiple places. And the other thing too is clients should have access to it. If you are an MSP and you're storing their data, having a window of access can bring a lot of transparency and trust between the client and working relationship, making that easy for them to view that information. It is their data, and it's important to make sure that they can see it easily. And of course, the final part is make sure it's secure. Those security standards are really important. And while not all of these are applicable to Hudu, if you happen to be SOC 2 like us, that does help with the security. Now, the other thing is treating documentation like a living, breathing organism. We talked about it before, reiterate, build off of it. This isn't something that can just be written once and left. This is something that should be reviewed regularly. Now, and making sure that you have a standard for it and that it's replicable and easy in creating a standard for it. Make sure that when you're clicking onto a document, you're not wondering if it's up to date. And the next thing is, when do we need to update? And that's a great time to talk to the people who are doing the documentation or who are utilizing it the most. And a great way of what needs to be written, what's missing, and having those conversations of the people who are directly using it are going to know what's missing or things to improve on it. And the next part is continuing with that last point from the previous couple of slides is the automation, setting up those alerts to let you know when something's reaching that due date. Rather than having 100 sticky notes on your desk, make sure that you have a system in place that lets you know what's going on. Make sure that you're not having to constantly check your calendar or trying to backtrack or clicking on every single individual item to knowing when they were last updated. Setting up alerts, flagging documentation, items that are really important for keeping things up to date. And then next we have a create documentation structure. You want to make it easy for employees to document. And when we say take away the decision-making, what we're trying to say is guide them to the expectations that you have. What fields need to be enforced? What are the expectations of it? Make sure that the field input and that the items that you are adding are a lot easier to identify, understand. So that way they're not having to interpret what you want and instead get to fill out those items quite quickly. And then the other part too is have a lead for a larger organization who focuses on documentation. It can be a full-time job, especially with the more items you stack and you add on top of. And it's really important to make sure that someone's the head of that. When they're directing it and organizing it, rather than leaving the individual to keep up with it, a leader can set an example to continue what those needs are. And many of you are those people who are leading and are the example that many people look up to. So if your documentation is fantastic, the employees will be following that example. It does start at the top and work its way down. So having those leads are really important. Gamification, if you have to, of course. This is one of the things that we recommend right off the bat. Building that culture is really important to make it natural, but sometimes gamification just works better, and that's totally fine. And as always, make sure they have time to document. It's very easy to get caught up in items, and we don't want the documentation debt, not quite like technical debt, but it is harder to remember those quick pieces of information that were really important. And then, of course, as we want to say as well, don't force documentation, making sure that you bring it in naturally, that you're supporting the system around it, making sure that you are able to actually build it around the people who are using it. And the same thing with creating great SOPs and step-by-steps. You don't have to do all of that yourself. There might be team members that you have who are incredible at what they do. Make sure that you're talking to them. How do they do it well? How can this process be translated to someone who might be user, and how can we break that down? And now this last one might sound a little harsh, but you are not promotable until you're replaceable. And what that means is if you have a great developer, a great technician, and they're fantastic at what they do, but they don't have the record keeping to have someone else take that step, they can't really move on to that leadership role or that next step where they are incredibly important, where they already have the information. So if you're recording documentation, you're writing it well, you're in a better spot to move forward because the next person who steps in doesn't have to start from ground zero. They have all the groundwork laid out for them.
So Sam, that is your last slide for this piece. I don't know, do you want to address the question in the chat before we kick it back over to Carrie?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris brought up a great question. I do want to read it fully real quick before I answer it. Yeah, so that's a great point of should your passwords be stored in the same system, especially when you are having the documentation system or client access. And now the thing is, it really depends on your internal processes, the security that you feel comfortable with. And one way, yes, if you have a system go down, whatever you're doing for storing passwords in your documentation, it isn't all in one. So you have to consider either what is the best way for security for you, what's the consistency of those down points, and also how often are you needing that information, and can you back up that info? Within Hudu, you can export entire companies. You are able to have that full export and PDF information, but you can make sure to pull it aside. If the worst case scenario happens, you do have your documentation with you. Yeah, and suggestion for auditing documentation. So I am familiar with LCI, the Lifecycle Insights. They do a auditing system on what's going on with your documentation, quality, and items like that as well. Yes, and I think the other thing too that Peter brings up is convenience. Security is incredibly important, but so is that lost time when you're jumping back and forth. It really does come down to the individual, and that's the best thing about a malleable platform is you get to control how you use it, and you're not forced into using every single feature. And within Hudu, you get everything right off the bat, and you get to customize what you do and don't need. So the other thing too is convenience, that single source of truth, the accessible data and relationships. Now, I can talk way too much, so I'm going to put a pin in that for now. I'm going to hand it off, and if people have more questions, especially if you're directing it towards Hudu, feel free to use that Q&A. I'll be keeping an eye on chat, and that way I can direct my questions to all of you.
Okay, I think we're ready for some more wine then. I
Yes.
love my job.
I also like your job.
Yeah. Come out, let me do my job for you in person. So we are moving on to red wines. And this is the tapestry that I will be speaking to. I think most of you do have the tapestry. But again, any questions, you can forward those along to Mimi or your team and they'll get them to us. Tapestry is actually a Bordeaux style red blend. And what that means is it has the noble grapes. This is a true blend. There is not 70% of one wine in here to call it, for instance, a Cabernet. So this will be Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, Merlot, Cab Franc, and Petit Verdot. And when we are swirling, you are drinking the 2019, most of you. So hence I have this beautiful glass, which you can't see, but now you can. This is actually a proprietary glass developed by Trevor Durling, our wine master, and George Riedel with Riedel Glass. It is meant for young, big, bold wines. And the whole point is, and Sam, can you hold up your glass? Because you had a nice big glass too. So you want a big,
did a light
well,
pour.
you didn't pour a lot in it. I meant the actual glass itself. So you want, when you're talking about, now not library wines, that would be a small glass, but you want a big glass because you want it to breathe. You want to be able to aerate. And by the way, you can call it swirling. You can call it volatilizing the esters. It is not snobby unless you want it to be. And if you want it to be snobby, put your pinky out when you do it.
Am I doing it right over here?
Yeah, there you go.
Wonderful.
So, but this beautiful, beautiful wine, first of all, very approachable, but will age. It's not going to age for 40 years, but it will age. The other thing I love about tapestry, you need to understand that there are wines that go with food and there are those that don't. This is neither. It goes with anything. You can drink it now. or you can save it. One thing I love about Tapestry is with that price point, if I am going to a party and I know I'm leaving work, and I'm not leaving a Saturday until 7:30 at night, I'm going to a party where, one, I may not know what food they're serving. It's a crowd pleaser. Two, I may not know how much people have already had. So it is a very economical wine as well. And you can find it. Well, I think all of you can find it locally, quite frankly, because that is. But go ahead and when we are smelling this wine, the one thing you do want to do, especially with red wines, especially like this, it is a Bordeaux, it's a blend. There's a lot in there. All those grapes I mentioned are noble grapes for a reason. They all have their own characteristic, right? So when you're smelling, take your time. And, you know, there are people who do this instantaneously. That's worse than the pinky out, Sam, by the way. So you want to take your time. You want to kind of get to know it, because almost everything you get from wine is from your nose. So if you have a sinus infection, do not drink wine. It is just, and from in the decanter, yes, that's why we call this a decanter on a stem, by the way. And it should go in the decanter then. But if you're sticking your nose right in there, you're not going to get much of the bouquet. So you really want to be able to smell it all. So you smell all around the glass too, and you smell a few times, because there's primary and secondary aromas. And when you're smelling, a quick smell will give you something. When you smell more, it's going to give you more. And trying to describe what you are smelling is impossible, because it's all about what you remember. So even olfactory nerves, literally, they use them in memory centers to bring you back to something. Two of my favorite things with this, I grew up, does anyone know where Youngstown, Ohio is? Good. It's outside of Cleveland, but it's awful. But it was a great place to grow up. But their blueberries are really itty bitty, just wild blueberries. Then you go to somebody in Washington State, their idea of a blueberry is very, very different, right? And just to say cherries. So, oh, you're from Lisbon. Oh my goodness. Lisbon's better than Youngstown. But your memory banks go with what you can perceive when you're smelling. So the other thing is, when we had a food and wine pairing one time, and somebody who, when they came in, they said, nope, we know the experience. We know it's red wine. All of a sudden she loved red wine. She said, it reminds me of my grandfather. I said, oh, did your grandfather drink red wine? Nope. So I looked at her and I said, did your grandfather smoke a pipe? She said, yep. And that's exactly what it was. She was picking up the tobacco. So I was pointing her in the direction of which red wines she may like. But it is a smell that was very, very much in her mind. So go ahead and take a sip. Well, hopefully you already have. I just allowed myself.
Maybe a couple in between.
So a few things with this. With Tapestry, you will always find, yes, it will vary vintage to vintage, right? However, it's going to be consistent. You know it's going to be that style. The other thing with Tapestry now, I would love you to try it with that English cheddar. You will be amazed at how different It actually is. Because to that point of decanting it, I'm getting tannins on my tongue. I do not have a cheese platter here. And so I'm getting tannins on my tongue, and I love tannins, so I'm fine with it. But that is why cheese goes so beautifully with wine. When you are having that cheese, there is also that fattiness in it that then tannins are molecules that go on your tongue. The bigger the molecules, the more you feel. They will attract to the fattiness of it. So then you're going to get a more fruit forward wine. And when we say fruit forward, we do not mean sweet, by the way. And as you come up with questions about that, I do want to jump into a little bit about that 2019. And you guys have been full of questions. So lots of entries in the raffle. I love it. Really, Beaulieu Vineyard is, and this is not being arrogant. You can ask many, many, many people in the valley. Beaulieu Vineyard is the reason Napa Valley is what it is today. And that is in large part due to Georges and Madame de la Tour, as well as they brought Andrei Chelychov, French trained winemaker from Russia. Chelychov is not a French name. Je suis désolé, mais je ne parle pas français, for those of you who are in Quebec. But they really realized that the land here was planted and it's gorgeous, and it had more potential to make wines that can age, that can stand up to food. So Georges de la Tour Private Reserve, the very first one that was served at the White House at state dinners, because they were not embarrassed to serve it to the French, quite frankly. And that is documented. I'm not making that up, I promise. And we do sell back to 1973. We sold out of 72 last year, everyone's 50th birthday, 50th anniversary. I just turned 50 in April. I had a 1973. It was phenomenal if you like older wine. If you don't, then you wouldn't like it. But the 2019 Georges de la Tour is off the charts. And like I said, 100 points from James Suckling, and named #1 wine of the year. So, and that is truly our flagship wine. We have lots of other wines when you all come out and visit us. Small production, like that Sauvignon Blanc. We only make a couple hundred cases, but we have lots of other wines like that. And I will tell you, just so you know, the 2020, I'm sorry, squirrel moment. The 2020 that will be coming out, gorgeous. Small production, but gorgeous. So keep putting those questions in throughout the rest of, you want that bottle of 2020, I'm telling you. I mean, 2019. Any questions?
So if you don't mind, if I throw one in there, you did talk about the white wine pairing. What would you pair necessarily for a meal with this?
Great question. And so that is the nice thing about Tapestry. It kind of goes with a lot. Now, remember, I'm a wine snob. And literally, if I'm going to have a big, beautiful tomahawk steak, I'm going to have a full Cabernet, right? But Tapestry goes with anything. Tapestry will stand up to a beautiful steak. You can also have it with pepperoni pizza. You know, when you get a little bit of that spiciness from the pepperoni. But it's just a very versatile wine. It'll also just go with a fireplace. You know, so it is that if I'm just home, that's the wine I'm going to open when I'm just going to have a glass. And I'll use my pivot and just have a glass.
Hey, Carrie, Mimi
Yes.
here. Can you share with them mushrooms and pepper and how a little bit of mushrooms with just about anything will pair well with red wine and black pepper?
Absolutely. And again, back to
I love
my
your mushrooms with sauteed mushrooms and salmon too.
Yes. So back to my original point, though, this is all about everyone's preferences, right? So when you are talking wine tasting, when you're smelling, you smell everything. You only have 5 taste buds. That's it. Sweet, sour, salty, umami. It's sweet, sour, salty, umami. It's savory. So that's all you have. So when you're pairing things, the taste is all on your tongue, and the taste of wine from your mouth, the true taste, is more tactile. And so do me a favor real quick. I know you'll look silly, but none of you are on camera. I am. I'll do it. I want you to plug your nose and
Join
take
you.
a sip of the wine. And keep it plugged till you swallow. Nothing, huh?
I will say that was a little bit weirder than I was expecting.
It's a lot of acid, there's like nothing in there. Because it comes from your nose.
I feel like I got everything the second I opened my nose up too.
Yeah. So to Mimi's point, when you're talking mushrooms, and I apologize, I always say a cab and a slab, but I think I make sauteed mushrooms at least 5 days a week. Yeah, we grill out a lot here. So with those mushrooms, because you are getting that umami, and it depends on the wine you're having, a little drizzle of some balsamic when you're doing it, you're getting that, plus you're getting the earthiness. And when you're talking a red wine, especially North Valley, anywhere from Yountville North, you're gonna get beautiful earthiness in the smell of it, and the mushrooms just bring that out. And part of it is science, part of it is psychological. When you're smelling mushrooms, you know they're earthy. So you all of a sudden start putting that together and you start pulling other things out. One of the other things somebody even asked me, there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful, big, bold Cabernets. And we talk about it is like crushed rock that you can, and people are like, how do you know what that tastes like? I'm like, it's not, it's what it smells like. But take yourself back when you fell off your bike on gravel. Now you can all remember exactly what crushed rock tastes like. We don't eat crushed rock, and I do not encourage it, but we all know. So again, people mix up flavor, which is all from your nose, and taste from your mouth. Anything else I missed?
Any more questions for Carrie?
There was one in chat, and I believe they were just asking how long has BV been making Tapestry?
Oh, Tapestry has been made since, and Mimi, help me out with this, 1973. I do believe, but it was off and on. So truly until we sell back to 2003. And again, it's not built to age that way. It's built, I mean, the 2003 is gorgeous, but it's not built to age like the George de la Tour.
I am looking and I don't see first vintage, but I can tell you it was my dad's favorite wine. And I grew up drinking this, definitely in the 80s for sure.
Yeah. And I know you guys have to get back to your meeting. What is Hudu?
Yeah, so Hudu
Because I
is,
want to know what wine documentation and how I can help you document wine in Hudu.
and I was coming up with a reply as that as well. I told them I'm already reaching out to our developers at this moment. But no, Hudu is a documentation platform. We store info, passwords, client data. You know, in this case, you have direct sellers for your vineyard, you might record the things that they might typically buy, their typical inventory that they often have, how often they purchase, who their primary contact is, kind of things like that, making sure that's easy and accessible as possible.
Okay.
But
So
the
any
wine
other
documentation
questions
feature.
before I let you all get back to business and continue drinking? Does anyone have a favorite cheese with either wine? Can I just ask? Okay. All right, well, it was lovely to meet you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
And then if you are traveling to Napa, please have Casey reach out. We'd be happy to set you up for a visit at BV or one of our sister wineries or to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Don't be surprised when I show up there, Carrie.
Oh, Ty, I fully expect you.
I also expect a postcard from you, Ty. That would be great. I'd really appreciate that.
No, Sam, you'll be there with him. Okay.
Done.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting all, and thank you for giving us the time and having us.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Carrie.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Liongard and how that relates to documentation. And probably more specifically, let's talk about Liongard and security as it relates to your documentation as well. We've all heard that cliche of there are no dumb questions, but I'm going to go ahead and ask a dumb question. How can you secure something if you don't know it exists? You can't, right? That's a dumb question. We can't secure something if we don't know it exists. So the very first step to that risk mitigation there is visibility across your stack. We must know what's out there as an MSP if we want to expect to secure those items. Now, right along with that, anytime you are doing manual documentation, A, it goes stale quickly, and B, it does put you at a severe disadvantage. Now, I do want to sort of level set a little bit here. When Ty Smith is referring to documentation, I'm not necessarily referring to some of those things that Sam was talking about earlier, that human-generated intelligence. I'm talking much more about those system configurations, right? And with your system configurations, the more detail you have, the better off you are, right? We can't fix something if we don't know how that item is supposed to be configured when it is working. And that really is the glory of automating your documentation through Liongard. We're going to capture way more than you could possibly ever think about capturing using that manual process, right? We're not going to capture host names and IP addresses and maybe a couple of hardware details. We're going to give you as much information about those target systems as we can possibly bring back. Therefore, when the customer calls and says, hey, we've got a problem with this particular system, you've got all of the information, not only all the information at your fingertips, but you also know you have accurate information and you're not dealing with stale documentation. Now, I also probably should have done another little level set before I started. I'm trying my best to talk to you as an ex-MSPer. Before I started at Liongard, I was an escalation tech in an MSP. And speaking from that perspective, I can't tell you how many times I pulled up a piece of documentation. I get a ticket escalated to me. I pull up a piece of documentation that I find is stale. In that instance, I might as well not have any documentation at all, right? I've already set myself behind the curve with that stale documentation. When did that customer onboard? 2 years ago. Awesome. Documentation hasn't been updated since then. I'm really starting from scratch at that point. Automating that documentation is going to give you that good data. That's going to lead to good insights. And of course, those good insights are going to lead right into good security outcomes. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit the next one. Beautiful. So because Liongard is bringing back all of those deep configuration details, and we're doing it on a daily basis, by the way, we can create good, solid security baselines against that data that we return. You can start that process with just a minimum level of compliance, but then you can adapt that as the relationship with your customer goes to ensure that you're giving them the security that they need for those particular systems that you are managing for them. Now, right along with that, configuration drift is going to hurt an MSP tremendously. Most MSPs out there, as a matter of course, when they onboard a new customer, they're checking for things like, is MFA enabled and is advanced threat protection turned on for my firewall? Having said that, most MSPs don't go back and check to see if those things were turned off a month down the road, 2 months down the road, 6 months, a year, so on and so forth. Because you can create your baselines in Liongard and you can alert against those, we can check those on an ongoing process. So if somebody turns off advanced threat protection, maybe they did it on purpose, maybe it was to test something, but quite often those tests, as you all probably well know, don't always get reverted back to that state to ensure the customer's protected. Creating that baseline in Liongard, setting up your actionable alert template to make sure that you're alerted when you fall outside of that baseline, like advanced threat protection being turned off, you can then proactively go back and say, okay, why did we turn this off? And did we mean to turn it back on? If the answer is yes, let's go bring ourselves back to that baseline so we can confidently tell our customer, yes, we are securing you in the ways that we know are going to make you more effective and more secure. Right along with that, because we're bringing back all those details and we have all those baselines set up in Liongard, we can also create report templates that will help you align against critical security controls like CIS. We have built-in report templates for CIS for the controls that you see there. We do plan on adding more as we go. You can also create your own custom templates for things like NIST or HIPAA compliance as well. All of the report templates inside of Liongard can be cloned. So you might even be able to take the existing CIS control templates, clone those, and sort of modify those for different security controls as well. Awesome. So we've created those baselines. We know the customer's secure. We've kept them adhered to those baselines. Now it's time to share that with the customer. I guarantee I'm preaching to the choir here when I say IT work and MSP work is completely thankless. If everything's working exactly as planned, the customer says, hey, everything's working great. What exactly am I paying for you? You're just sitting around doing nothing. It's just working. If it's constantly broken, hey, what are we paying you for? Everything's constantly broken. Either way, you get the question constantly of what are we paying you for, whether things are perfect or whether they're constantly crashing. We can help that with Liongard and show those wins by educating the customer. Hey, look, here's the baseline that we are ensuring daily that you're adhering to. And here are those critical security templates that we are ensuring that we're adhering you to through the entire duration of your contract with that customer. Governance and reporting along those security controls specifically can drive measurable outcomes that you can then share with your partner. So the next time they ask, what are you doing for me? You have an answer locked, loaded, ready to go that you can prove you are doing to help that customer. Any questions there before we actually hop into the platforms?
Now, I don't know if that question there is directed to you or to us, but I believe it's about that capability for the SonicWall integration. Perfect.
Absolutely. So one of the awesome things about Liongard is completely customizable. So any data point that we return can be turned into an actionable alert and or added to a report to generate that baseline that we're talking about. So absolutely, if any setting that exists that we're able to return, that we're able to automatically detect and pull back, obviously the API endpoints for SonicWall V7 and above, that would be API based inspection. So we pull back anything that we can from that SonicWall API. Any one of those data points can absolutely be turned into an actionable alert or a report as well.
Okay. Ready to hop into the platforms?
Yes, we do have a couple questions if we want to answer them right now, or if you want to direct those directly to them while we talk about the platforms, whatever we think is the best use of time right now.
Ty, do you mind answering? Is that easy to answer in the chat, and we'll go ahead and jump into the platform? Just looking at time.
Sure. Skylar's asked, mentioned leveraging Liongard for HIPAA compliance. Do I know if anyone uses it for PCI? Skylar, I'm going to be honest, I have not heard of anyone using it for PCI compliance. But again, right along those same lines of those custom actionable alerts, any data point that we pull into Liongard can be added to a report template. Those report templates can be run either on your from information from your last inspection or even in the past. So you could go and say, hey, I want to know what all of my data points were 6 months ago for a particular system or device. So while I haven't heard of anyone using it for PCI, I certainly can't imagine any reason why you couldn't. Again, with those custom metrics, really anything is possible inside of Liongard. If we're pulling the data back, we can bring it to where specifically you need it to exist.
All right, awesome. I'm going to steal the screen real quick. I'm going to do a super quick highlight of just some items within Hudu, talking about some of those quick items, and then I am going to pass it back over to Liongard, so that way we can wrap up. And again, if anyone has questions or anything else, please feel free to throw them in there, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can as we start to wind down tonight. But going into it, making sure everyone can see everything fine. One thing that I really wanted to point out within Hudu is just that single source of truth, quick access to documentation and items. Even on your dashboard alone, while we do silo your documentation company to client, you are able to get a very great summary just from the front page of your dashboard. Favorite items, recents, expiring soon, for the admin, what's happening in your instance, and important items like that. When it comes to the organization of Hudu, while we do separate those items by your company, in this case, Tesco, we do highlight and try to separate those so they're easy and very, very simple to navigate. Now, talking about customization, you are able to build these out, these layouts, however you like them to view. You're able to customize each of these fields, make sure that you're keeping your passwords protected, And also that client share portal we have right here. If there's information that you want to provide to them totally for free, Hudu has lots of options to making sure that those who benefit from the work that you do, from the data that you have, is shareable and totally easy and accessible only when you want it to be. Now, beyond just that, we also have the bread and butter with documentation, and that is going to be the asset layouts. So just pulling one of those quick here, Hudu does bring in your integrations and still allow you to customize further. So with items that we have here, like this contact card, now don't worry, this is Synchro. I am excited to highlight a little bit of Liongard, but what it does do is it highlights the information and attaches to the card below. So you're not looking in a Liongard location. When you need to know info about a specific desktop, it's right there and you don't have to look in 4 different directions for it. With our integrations, we also try to make sure that they're as easy and straightforward as possible. So additionally, on top of guides, Liongard has made it even easier to build that integration. I mean, this setup guide is really just 2 keys and a link, and you are all set. We support just about all, Ty, you might have to step in here, 97 inspectors that you guys have?
81 currently.
81. It sounds like I'm just making up numbers now. Good thing I asked.
You were close enough.
Yeah, I'll take that. But we do support just about all of those inspectors. And when you are bringing in that data, we make sure to organize it for you as well. So in this case, we have these fields for you. You're able to jump in between those users' API keys, and we're just breaking it down a little bit, but we take that format for you and make it easy and accessible. So when you are navigating within Hudu, we want to make sure that you're never more than a couple clicks away from the things that you're looking for. Now, I do want to pass it over to Liongard so you can see what Liongard looks like inside, so that way you have a better idea of how these 2 items kind of connect. So I'm going to pass this on to you now.
Sam, before we do that real quick,
yeah.
Right there where you're sitting. So, we talked a little bit about that depth of data. You can
Yes.
see here when we do an AWS inspection, again, all of this is being pulled from Liongard. You're seeing VPCs, subnets, ACLs, interfaces, instances, security groups, volumes, S3 buckets, right? Anything you might want to know about your AWS instance, we're going to go collect. And again, we're going to do that automatically. So on a daily basis, so it's always up to date. You don't ever have to worry about, hey, what is the condition of my S3 buckets? You come in here, you click that tab, and you're going to see exactly what that condition is because it came directly from the source.
And on top of that as well, Hudu does sync automatically every 3 hours. If you want your reports even sooner, we got a little button up here to make that easy so you can refresh whenever you need to, and that will just bring in the most recent data. Now, are we ready to take over, or is there anything else that we want to talk about before we hop platforms?
I'm ready, as long as we don't have any questions.
That's all right. I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Okay.
I'll give control back to you and I'll answer what I can.
Perfect. Outstanding. So I'm going to land us here on our Liongard dashboard. Now, I don't want to spend too much time here. Obviously, we can set you all up with a demo if you're interested in Liongard to go into some of those finer details. But I did want to just talk quickly. We do have our dashboard here that shows us the total environments. That's simply your customers that you're doing business with. We have 256 systems rolled out across those customers. And this is obviously that actionable alerts feature I've talked about. So we can see here that in our demo instance, we have 161 different things that have probably kicked us off of our baseline, right? So those things to address. I'm going to go ahead and click into here to Contoso Nation, everyone's favorite test environment. And you can easily see that we actually will even bubble up the changes that have been detected, completely configurable, completely customizable, right? And this is key when that customer calls in and says, hey, this broke. We know that things don't just break. They break because something changed, whether that be a hardware failure or a configuration change. We can configure Liongard to bubble those changes up to the surface. So when a customer calls in and says, hey, this is broken, I can come in, click and see the exact things that have changed across all of the different system inspectors that we've rolled out. Right, so I can see here, looks like our DNS-A records changed. Looks like a whole bunch were removed and a couple were added. I could also see that we've had admins in Active Directory that have changed their password within the last day. Right, so this changes tab can give us some of those insight to things that have changed, so it can essentially speed up that troubleshooting process in trying to determine, okay, where did we go astray here? Show you really quickly our actionable alerts. Again, those actionable alerts are all customizable. You'll see here the create rule button, but I do want to quickly sort this by Liongard. You will see that we have 432 pre-built actionable alerts. All right, so anything you can turn on here, set you against that baseline. If your Microsoft 365 directory sync didn't happen within the last 24 hours, we can alert you. All right, so all of those things to make sure that you stay where you need to be to ensure that your customers are being properly secured. And again, talking about those report templates, I'm going to go ahead and we'll sort this by Liongard, and then I'm going to go ahead and sort this again by CIS. We will see here, at a click, we can do asset inventory against control 1.1, account management against 5.1 through 5.5, email security against control 9.5, software inventory against 2.1, and Windows patching against 7.4 and 7.5. But just to show you how quick and easy this is, let's go ahead and generate an email security report, just for webinar. So we'll call this whatever we want. I want to do this against all of my environments that are deployed. I simply hit the generate button and boom. I now have a report that shows me the situation for my SPF records. Does my DMARC exist on my domain? Was it found on the domain? And the same with the SPF. And again, I've done that with a matter of, what was that, 4 or 5 clicks total? I've done that across my entire customer base. So I can very confidently go tell my customer, we are monitoring these things for you, and we're doing it on a regular basis to ensure that you stay secure. So super powerful stuff there. As I mentioned, you can change that inspection date as well. So if we wanted to do this, maybe we wanted to do this report for 3 months ago. We hit the button, data rewinds to how it was 3 months ago, which is going to come incredibly handy when your cybersecurity insurance auditor shows up and you're looking to get insured for cybersecurity purposes. Liongard can make that happen. We can show you not just what you currently sit at, but what you sat at 6 months ago, 12 months ago, all the way up to 18 months ago in the past. And because I know that we are insanely over time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up. If we have any questions, of course, please fire them my direction.